In the year AD 30, a carpenter from the village of Nazareth walked along the shores of a lake in northern Israel. What he said and did in this place would echo for 2,000 years. Today, we walk those same shores. The Sea of Galilee is not, in fact, a sea. It is a freshwater lake, 13 miles long, 7 miles wide, set in the Jordan Rift Valley nearly 700 feet below sea level. It is the lowest freshwater lake on earth. The Hebrew name is Kinneret, from the word for harp, shaped like the curved instrument it resembles from above. In Scripture it is also called the Sea of Tiberias and the Lake of Gennesaret. The water comes from the Jordan River in the north and flows back out to the south. Black basalt cliffs ring much of the shore. Hills rise steeply to the east, falling to the Golan Heights. To the west, the land flattens into fertile plains. In the 1st century, these shores were not quiet. They were busy. They were loud. Fishing villages dotted the coastline. Roman roads ran along the northern edge. Trade and travel flowed from Damascus in the north to Egypt in the south. And this lake, small as it is, sat at the center of it. This is the world Jesus entered. To understand what the Gospels describe, we have to see the Galilee that existed 2,000 years ago. Rome had ruled the land for nearly a century. The Jewish people lived under occupation, taxed heavily, watched carefully, their temple standing in Jerusalem, but their politics dictated by Caesar. Herod the Great had died 3 decades earlier. His son, Herod Antipas, ruled the Galilee region from a newly built city called Tiberias, right on the western shore of the lake. The economy of these shores was built on fish. Salted fish from Galilee was traded across the Roman Empire, sent to Rome itself, to Alexandria, to the legions stationed across the provinces. The town of Magdala, hometown of Mary Magdalene, took its name from the Aramaic word for tower, likely a reference to the salting towers that rose above the water. At the time of Jesus, several towns formed a ring around the northern shore. Capernaum, a fishing village that had grown into a customs outpost. Bethsaida, near the Jordan inflow on the eastern side. Chorazin, in the hills above. Each had a synagogue. Each was home to families whose fathers, grandfathers, and great-grandfathers had cast nets in these waters. The disciples Jesus called, Peter, Andrew, James, John, were not wandering idealists. They were working men, professional fishermen, business partners. When Jesus walked up and called them to leave their nets, he was asking them to abandon a livelihood that had sustained their families for generations. The Gospels place more of Jesus' public ministry on these shores than in any other single region. It begins here. The Gospel of Matthew tells us that as Jesus walked by the Sea of Galilee, he saw 2 brothers, Peter and Andrew, casting a net into the sea. "Follow me," he said, "and I will make you fishers of men." Scripture says they immediately left their nets and followed him. A little farther, he called James and John, the sons of Zebedee, mending their nets with their father. They too left the boat and followed. It is on this lake that one of the most famous moments of the Gospels unfolds. Jesus and his disciples set out in a boat to cross to the other side. Jesus fell asleep. And then, Mark tells us, a great windstorm arose and the waves were breaking into the boat. The Sea of Galilee is known to this day for its sudden, violent storms. Cold air rushes down from the Golan Heights, meets the warm air sitting over the lake, and within minutes the surface can turn from glass to chaos. Seasoned fishermen have died on these waters. The disciples, fishermen who had grown up on this lake, were terrified. They woke Jesus. "Lord, save us. We are perishing." And Mark records what happened next. Jesus stood, rebuked the wind, and said to the sea, "Peace, be still." The wind ceased. The sea became calm, and the disciples said to one another, "Who then is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him?" On another night, Jesus sent his disciples ahead across the lake while he went up the mountain to pray. A strong wind came against them. They rowed for hours, making little progress, and in the fourth watch of the night, sometime between 3 and 6 in the morning, they saw a figure walking toward them on the water. They cried out in fear, thinking it was a ghost. Jesus said to them, "Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid." It was here on this lake that Peter stepped out of the boat, and it was on a hillside above these waters, on what tradition calls the Mount of Beatitudes, that Jesus delivered the greatest sermon in history. "Blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are the meek. Blessed are the merciful. Blessed are the pure in heart. Blessed are the peacemakers." At a nearby place called Tabgha, according to the Gospels, Jesus fed 5,000 people with 5 loaves and 2 fish. The people sat on the grass. The disciples distributed the food. 12 baskets of leftovers were gathered up. And at the very end of the Gospel of John, after the resurrection, it is to this lake that Peter returns. He goes fishing. He catches nothing. And in the morning light, a figure calls from the shore, "Children, do you have any fish?" When Peter realizes it is the risen Jesus, he throws himself into the water and swims to meet him. It is on this shore that Jesus asks him 3 times, "Do you love me?" And 3 times Peter answers, "Lord, you know that I love you." What remains of this world today? More than you might think. In 1986, during a drought that dropped the level of the Sea of Galilee by several feet, 2 brothers from a nearby kibbutz were walking along the exposed shoreline when they noticed wooden planks sticking out of the mud. They had stumbled onto an intact fishing boat dated by carbon testing and construction style to the 1st century. It is now known as the Jesus boat, housed in the Yigal Allon Museum at Kibbutz Ginosar. It is exactly the kind of boat the disciples would have rowed. The ancient village of Capernaum has been excavated. Visitors today can walk the basalt streets where Jesus walked. They can stand in the ruins of the synagogue where he taught, built upon the foundations of the very 1st century synagogue mentioned in the Gospels. A short walk away, archaeologists uncovered what appears to be the house of Simon Peter, with early Christian graffiti scratched into the walls from centuries of pilgrims who believed this was the place. On the hillside above, the Mount of Beatitudes is still a place of quiet, a hillside of wildflowers where pilgrims sit in small groups and read the sermon aloud. At Tabgha, a church built over a 4th century mosaic marks the traditional site of the feeding of the 5,000. The mosaic, of a basket, 2 fish, and 4 loaves, is still visible on the floor, and the lake itself has barely changed. The same cold winds still fall from the Golan Heights, the same sudden storms still arise, the same morning mist still rises at dawn. There is something about walking where Scripture walked. To stand at the edge of this lake is to stand in the same air, on the same stones, under the same sky that Jesus and his disciples knew. To see the hills where the Sermon on the Mount was preached, to hear the water lap the shore as it did 2,000 years ago. The Gospel of Matthew records a promise Jesus made on these shores. "Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light." The invitation he gave here, to the fishermen mending their nets, to the crowds pressing in from the hillsides, to the weary and the wounded, is the same invitation he gives today. Thank you for walking with us. Next week, we journey to a garden on the Mount of Olives the night before the cross. Subscribe and walk with us, one sacred place at a time.